I'm Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing the expansion for Zoo Tycoon New Shores. This is a prototype, all rules and components subject to change, and I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. This New Shores is an expansion to Zoo Tycoon. I believe the campaign is for an updated edition, if I'm not mistaken, as well as the expansion New Shores. I will not be diving heavily into how Zoo Tycoon plays. It is a heavy game. Honestly, my biggest complaint against it is the fact that it takes a lot to really pick up. It's not a easily absorbable game, but once you do get there, there's a lot of managing of the various species in a way that can be very rewarding. But I'll let you go check out my past review on the original base game, or alternatively, you're here because you already know about the base game and you just want to know what the expansion adds. To that end, today we're going to talk about what the expansion adds, my thoughts on the expansion, the various elements. It's a bunch of things being thrown in, and I'll tell you how I feel about each of them. But first, let's tell you about those elements. I guess the short 30-60 seconds on Zoo Tycoon. Zoo Tycoon is a zoo management game. You're going to be constantly gathering species, trying to be mindful of breeding those species, getting the right ratio of female to male populations to make sure you can accomplish your goals. Every single card in the original game is going to have their own things that they're trying to be mindful of, and you're trying to fulfill all those attributes, from zoo enclosure size, to the number of animals you have, to the experience they have, different things you're trying to be mindful of as you try to grow those species as much as possible to build the most successful, thriving zoo you can. There's a lot of other things. There's shops, there's education booths, there's a lot of other things going on in the game, but again, I'll let you check out the original review for that or any other content out there. As far as the New Shores expansion, New Shores is going to be adding a lot of small things and a few larger things. The first thing, to get this out of the way, and my table is littered with it over here, is going to be new animals. You're going to have entirely new animals for the New Shores expansion. You're going to have a new annual board, and you're also going to have a modular animal exchange. The animal exchange is basically the little sheet that goes under this board over here, where you can go ahead and move this around. You'll see little markers showing you the various ratio of trade in for those things, and if you slide them around, you completely change up the entire marketplace, giving you a constantly dynamic market with this overlay board and the little punch board holes through them. So you can have entirely new species in the game, and yes, you can mix and match. They don't recommend doing so for your first few games, but they do have a whole modular animal exchange that will give you ways to mix and match cards. So for example, I have a whole stack of cards here from the base game. These cards can go on top of various areas. There are specific rules as to how you do them. It's not completely wild. You want to put them on specific areas or whatnot, but it'll give you a way to have completely unique market of different animals from both games. So that's going to be an option you have over there. Past that, in addition to the new animals, which again, entirely new overlay of animals, there's also going to be new biomes. There's going to be tundra and steppe, as well as water and dry forest. There's going to be new biomes there. The main impact I think it has is the water operates differently, but we'll come to that when we get into the new species and how those all operate. There's also going to be neutral education booths, which I don't have in front of me over here. Education booths are going to be a metric you're trying to be mindful of in the game. The original education booths needed specific terrains to go ahead and match. This one is a little bit more wild because you have these new elements, because you have these new terrain elements. They needed to make them a little bit more modular to make it so that the games are balanced. So now education booths just require two different terrains, and you can't have the same combination of two different terrains twice. So you can't have, tundra and steppe combined with water twice. You could have tundra and steppe combined with water, and then water together with dry forest when you're working out these education booths. So that's, again, a little element there. If you know about the base game and the education booths, that will all make sense. It's just more, it's not really an addition to the game so much as an adjustment to the game to account for the new biomes you have. You also have selectable biome animals. I don't know if I have any. Here we go. We have one over here, the South American tartar right here. This one on the card itself will show you that this card can be in different terrains, different tundras. So you have certain animals that are a bit more flexible in how they go into your zoo. So that's going to be something else to manage, or not manage, something else you can do as far as the new animal types. You're also going to have new elements to the game that are just being added. So you're going to have new conservation projects, new donors, new donors and new events being added to the game. So again, that's just more stuff, some of it related specifically to the new elements. And then you'll also have the biggest elements, because all these are kind of small things, I think, well, except for the giant amount of new animals. But the biggest thing is going to be within the new animal types. You're going to have those three types. You can have the selectable biome animals, or three new types, I should say. The selectable biome animals, as well as reptiles and water species. So reptiles are going to be a bit different. They're going to be mostly similar to the base game. The area they're going to be different is you're going to have reptile houses that go on terrains. When you have little terrain elements on your board, these will go taking up a terrain spot. So that's a full area taking up its own terrain spot, not being on the terrain, but taking up a full terrain element. I should have shown you the base board over here. That's going to be the new reptile houses. I think the bigger change you're looking at, though, is reptiles are going to be producing eggs as opposed to general species or animals. And the eggs, you can actually go ahead and choose their gender. So it's going to give you a lot more flexibility in terms of changing, or in terms of ensuring you have the right male and female populations. In the general Zoo Tycoon, there's more of a chance of which you'll actually get, but with most species, I say, with most species, there's going to be a chance of what you get based on the dice roll. But over here with the reptiles, you're going to have eggs, and I believe there is some science behind it as far as the temperature that you can actually control for that. I'm just going from the rulebook on this one. I don't actually know the science behind reptilian species and gender generation, but you have eggs and you can make those eggs whatever you want, giving you a lot more control. I'll also briefly touch upon something we're going to have later, but eggs are also going to go into your vivarium. In one of the spots of your vivarium, you're going to have the opportunity to put eggs. We'll come back to the vivarium later, but this gives you a slight adjustment to the way animals work. So it's not a major change to the game. It gives you a few small rules things. They actually have a great little play rate over here that will cover some of the new areas, which we're going to have the reptile species, the reptiles, the water tiles, and the vivarium are going to be some of the three bigger impacts as far as your actual gameplay. Again, past just having entirely new animals, and it's all covered nicely on the card. That's going to be what reptiles being. The water tiles and water species, that's going to be a bigger change in my opinion. See, the water tiles and water species, let's go ahead and find ourselves some water species. A big part of that, how their cost is going to determine. Animals always have an upkeep cost, but in the case of water species, it's more that they need to be on water tiles, and water tiles have an inherent cost on them. So in general, when you're placing out the various land or the terrain in your zoo, you have different tiles, and they don't usually have a typical cost associated with the maintenance of those. Usually animals have maintenance, not the terrain themselves. With these water species, it's going to be different. These will require a certain amount of water tiles in their habitat, and as you build it up more and more, but regardless of whether you're over providing the amount of water they need, you have to pay one cost for each water tile you have, giving you a new way that you have to be managing the maintenance and cost of your zoo. I'll also say that the aquatic species, they're also going to have shared experience. So normally in the game, you're going to have shared experience when you have animals and more of them come into play. You have this experience boost if they share a type. In the case of water species, not only do they get the boost for sharing the type, they get the boost for any water species in general. So your water species will kind of level up faster and more powerfully in the game. But again, you have that water upkeep cost element. So again, two new kind of species in addition to the selectable biome species. You're going to have different types of animals in terms of the reptile and the aquatic area, but we're not done yet. We also have semi-aquatic species. Semi-aquatic species are species that will need some degree of water in their biome, especially to go ahead and get to the higher levels of their tiers to be able to move all the way up. And those you're going to have to pay that upkeep cost, both for the animal themselves, as well as for the water terrains being put into their biome. So it's kind of a regular species with a dash of that aquatic element being thrown in. And then lastly, this is a lot of things so far, but lastly we have the vivarium. The vivarium is going to be this board over here, which you're going to be populating these various rows, getting points for those, but you're going to be getting the eggs will go in this booth over here, but past that, there's going to be the vivarium where you can go ahead and gather tiles, place them into your vivarium. The tricky part is you have to make sure to match at least one element for each row. So if I put this out over here, that's fine, but if I draw another one, it has to match at least one of the three things. So for example, this does share a type. So does it share a type? No, it does not share a type. Nope, does not share a type, does not share a biome, does not share whatever. So we have to go and put this in a new row. Let's see if the next one will over here. And we have this one, and this over here shares that terrain element over there. So as long as they share one of three things, they can be put into the row. Otherwise, they can't. So it gives you another little thing that you can pay into. For the cost is going to be 1 for the first one, 2 for the second one each round. They're going to be put out into the market board. You can acquire those every single round, and they give you something else to be mindful of as you manage your vivarium and the consistency of them. So every round when you're dealing with the market, you put a few out, you can buy them and add them to your vivarium and try to score extra points and get the in-game bonuses as you go. And that, I think that's all the new stuff the expansion adds. So it's kind of a lot of things when you list it all out, but as far as the big changes to the way the gameplay feels, I think it kind of does come down to this element over here. Because sure, there are new species, but that in and of itself doesn't make the game feel differently. And a lot of the small things like the education boost, the modular animal exchange, those are things that make the game feel differently. There is a long list of things. The three main areas that make the game feel differently are going to be the reptile houses, the water tiles, and the aquatic and semi-aquatic species, and the vivarium. Those are going to be the biggest thing. And then of course, like I said already, we have some new elements, new donors, new events, new conservation projects, and all of that. Which means with that, I think it's time to go ahead and dive into my review of this, just going through those things. I'm really just going to go through the entire list I just did, but telling you how I feel they impacted the game, added to the experience, didn't add to the experience, all of that. And I don't think anything here detracted from the experience, although we do have to be mindful of rules overhead and, of course, the cost of getting an expansion. Those are going to be the things you want to be mindful of when you think of the negatives. But I don't think, past rules overhead and the cost of getting an expansion, I don't think there's anything here that made the game worse. It's just a question of which added and which didn't for me. And for me, I'll start off with the fact that the new animals is great from a sense of variety. If you're playing this game a lot and you want to see some sense or difference before you get into the types of new animals, sure, variety is the spice of life. I enjoy that. I do think you have to be playing this game a lot more than just a few times here and there for that to really be an impact to you. But if you do want just that for the fun of it, and I didn't even put them on the table over here, I have them off to the side over there, but there's all the fun little meeples that go along with that. So if you want any of that, that's a nice to have kind of thing. I don't think it's necessarily essential. It doesn't necessarily make my experience better before we dive into the individual animal types. The modular animal exchange, kind of the same situation. I haven't felt the need to mix and match things yet because I don't play this game enough that I even feel that I strongly benefit from the new animals on their own, let alone the mixing and matching. But again, if you are playing this game a lot, that is a nice quality of life thing. The neutral education boost and the new biomes, again, the new biomes, the water is kind of essential. The rest I don't really care about. The neutral education boost feels like an essential adjustment to account for these, so much as opposed to a quality of life improvement, so to speak. It's not making the game better, it's just things that are essential to support the things that do make the game better. And then we have the selectable biome animals. I kind of don't feel the strong impact there. It's nice to have the flexibility, but it's just, I mean, again, it's fine. I'm not against them, but I can't be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that new change in the game. It's just a nice thing to have. The new events, new content in general, that's nice to have. New donors, new events, new conservation projects, that's nice to have. That's the kind of variety that I think I can appreciate, even with only playing this here and there. So those I definitely put in the nice to have for the sake of additional variety class of things. When we start getting into things, like I said already, is going to be the actual new content. The reptiles, the aquatic, the vivarium, all of that, so let's go ahead and do those. So, as far as the reptiles go, reptiles give you egg generation, which lets you choose your gender, and it gives you the reptile houses. For those, it's not bad to have them, and the rules overhead is minimal. So for the sake of the variety, if nothing else, it's nice to have. The tricky part, and this is where the rules overhead is a factor, is I think Zoo Tycoon's biggest weakness is the fact that the base game alone, before we dive into the expansion, I think the base game alone is a lot to manage, to teach. It's not complicated, it's just a lot. And to me, reptiles, in fact, this is going to be true with aquatic species as well, is just one more thing. They do have those player aids, which are great for that absorbability and not having to remember a whole rulebook over one small change, but it is one more thing to manage if you're diving into this game new for the first time. If you are someone who's already played this game, I don't think it's a big deal at all. It adds a dash of variety to the way you're going to approach your animal generation because of the adjustment on the eggs and being able to put them to your vivarium. So it's nice if you've already played the game. The rules overhead is minimal, but I don't think it added a lot to the gameplay experience that for me, I'd be hesitant to do those with new players just because it's more rules overhead, not a lot of rules overhead, but more rules overhead on top of a game that already has a lot of rules overhead. The aquatic species I liked more, and this is the tricky part because it might just be a thematic thing for me. I'm not sure. Maybe I just like the idea of having my park littered with water and with the species that inhabit the water, because I do think that feels more fun. Like the reptiles just feel like another species on the board. Sure, they have the reptile houses. It didn't feel significantly different to me as far as the overall presentation of my zoo. Whereas the water tiles, definitely the aquatic species, definitely did have that. And not just in the way that they look on the board, having that dash of blue, but also the maintenance of them really to me felt like a bigger shift. And again, it might be case by case, it might be person by person. The shift of determining your gender randomly or having a more agency over it is a big shift. I'd argue possibly a bigger shift than the way you pay your maintenance for the species versus the tiles. But for me, it felt more different on the aquatic side of things. So I think I did like the aquatic species. The rules overhead is still minimal, just as minimal as the reptiles, but I felt more fun about it, and it might just be a fun thing, I don't know. Even the element of the shared experience gives you more agency to branch out with a bit more freedom while still benefiting from the things you've built. So it's good. I think I like the aquatic species. That felt more worth it to me, although I do acknowledge it's kind of similar to the reptiles. I might just prefer the aquatic aspect. And the semi-aquatic builds off that nicely as well. Same kind of core concept, same idea. It's just one more thing to help your animals level up while paying or being mindful of those costs. Now the vivarium is another thing that I did like. The vivarium, again, rules overhead is minimal, and what it added to the game I thought was a bit more than what the reptiles do. So I do appreciate having this vivarium, extra ways to get various bonuses in the game, whether it's those one-time bonuses, the popularity that fades or whatnot, or whether it's ongoing things, but having the ability to buy those, put those in, having to match types, felt like its own little mini game puzzle that wasn't too expensive as far as the overall getting of those things, and it felt like one more thing for you to do, especially in this game where your board can fill up in this game, and so having one more area to put stuff did feel nice. I did like the vivarium. I thought it was a nice addition. Again, I don't know if I would do it with new players because it's not essential. I think the game already has a lot to manage, but it definitely felt like a nice addition overall. Which brings us to the final thoughts and rating on this one. And I gave the original Zoo Tycoon a 4 out of 5. I really like the core game, but at the end of the day, it is a game that's a bit harder to table. It's not the easiest one. There were some things that held it back a bit for me, but still a good game, a 4 out of 5. Expansions I don't rate based on the overall package. Rather, I rate expansions based on what they add to the experience. How good of an expansion is it based on the merits of it being something that's adding to the game? And for me, this does go to a 3.5 out of 5. I like the things that are being added for the most part, but a lot of them kind of feel like not necessarily that helpful or essential, at least for myself and my experience. I do like the vivarium and the aquatic species, but when you're factoring rules overhead, plus of course the cost of an expansion and what it brings to the table, I do think that New Shores falls into the nice to have kind of category. If you are a big fan of Zoo Tycoon and you want more content for this game, you're probably going to be picking this up. If you're trying to sit there and question for yourself, is this really worth it? Do I need this? I think it falls into the nice to have category, but far from essential. It gives you a few more things to do. The vivarium in particular feels like another thing that you can do in your zoo, and then past that, it's some adjustments, a bit more content, aquatic species and reptiles, all nice, but none of them essential to the Zoo Tycoon experience. So a 3.5 out of 5. And hopefully that helped you with, information about the game and whether this is right for you, whether you need either the base game, again, you check out my original coverage on that, or whether you want the expansion. This is going to be my review of Zoo Tycoon New Shores. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.